Good day, philosophers. Today we're going to present to you our Repititio about Alvin Paltinga's advice to Christian philosophers. So, Christian philosophers, we are called not just to be philosophers who happen to be Christians, but to think and work explicitly as Christian philosophers with autonomy, integrity, and courage, starting from faith in God and serving the Christian community.
So this is our supporting claims. We say this because Paltinga insists that Christian philosophers should not simply follow whatever is fashionable in Princeton or Berkeley or Harvard, but should take up the questions and projects that arise from the life and needs of the Christian community.
Moreover, we say this due to the fact that here the Christian philosophers may properly begin by presupposing God's existence and asking, for example, how belief in God is justified or how faith and reason relate, instead of feeling obliged always to define theism, supposedly neutral ground.
And the third supporting point is that we say this since Paltinga warns that if Christianity rely uncritically on currently popular philosophical assumptions like strict naturalism or event possession only, they risk adopting views of freedom, persons, and knowledge that quietly conflict with central Christian beliefs.
Okay, for our personal experiences, to illustrate those supporting points is that to illustrate the first point is that we consider how in many philosophy classes we feel a subtle pressure to choose safe, secular topics, even though the questions that really burn for us are about God, prayer, grace, and the Church's witness in a non-theistic academy.
Second, as an example for the second point, imagine a Christian student confidently trusting memory, perception, and logic and epistemology discussions, but suddenly becoming hesitant to mention that she also trusts a God-given capacity to know God, as if bringing in faith would make her less philosophical.
As regards to the third point, we ourselves experience that when we read only compatibilist or purely naturalistic accounts of freedom, it became harder to see how genuine moral responsibility before God or divine action in history could be real, until we step back and re-examine those issues from an explicitly theistic starting point.
Okay, for our valid objection, first, however, other people may say that if Christian philosophers focus on Christian projects, they risk becoming intellectually joyous and irrelevant to the broader philosophical conversations.
Regarding the second point, others object that starting from God's existence is biased and unphilosophical, since philosophy, they claim, should begin from premises acceptable to any rational person regardless of worldview.
To the third point, other thinkers claim that adopting neutral, widely accepted methods is precisely what protects us from smuggling our own theology into philosophy and therefore does not truly endanger Christian itself.
So this is our answers for the objections. To the first objection, we answer that taking Christian questions seriously does not mean ignoring others. Rather, it means bringing a distinctively Christian perspective into the common human project of understanding the world, which can actually enrich and challenge mainstream philosophy instead of merely echoing it.
To the second, we reply that no philosopher is really viewed from neutral. Naturalists start from naturalist assumptions, Kantians from Kantian ones, and so on. So Christians are equally entitled to let belief in God function as the basic starting point in their philosophical reflection.
And as to the third objection, we say that so-called neutral methods often already embody deep metaphysical commitments. For example, ruling out divine possession or agent possession by definition. So, uncritical use of them can slowly reshape Christian thinking more than we notice, unless we examine them openly in the light of faith.
Okay, for our illustration to support our answer, since we are a seminarian, in one seminar, we finally raised question about prayer, providence, and sin with a general discussion on freedom. Our classmates, both believers and non-believers, did not shut us down. Instead, they engaged more intensely, showing that explicitly Christian angles can open richer debate rather than closing it.
Second, regarding reading epistemology, we notice how some authors simply assume that only sense experience and human reason count as trustworthy sources, while others openly include revelation or a sensus divinatus, seeing that everyone is standing somewhere, help us own our Christian starting point instead of hiding it.
And next, in a group project on moral responsibility, we tried to follow a purely neutral framework that excluded God and grace from the discussion. The more we did that, the more our own Christian convictions felt like private add-ons, until we deliberately reintroduced a theistic account of persons and responsibility, which actually made the conversation more coherent for us.
In conclusion, we say that we, as a small community of Christian students and a future philosophers and priests, should not be content with being philosophers who merely happen to be Christians, but should consciously live and think as a Christian philosophers, drawing our questions from the Church's life, beginning unapologetically from belief in God, and dialoguing with the wider philosophical world in a way that is honest, critically responsible, and courageous.
So in our insight, first, as a group, we see more clearly that hiding our faith for the sake of neutrality is not philosophically honest. It's just they gives us the fact that everyone already works from some deep commitments.
Another insight is that we realize that our philosophical work is not only about debating skeptics, but also about helping the Christian community clarify what it believes about God, persons, freedom, and knowledge.
For our third insight is that we recognize that Paltinga's call for autonomy and integrity is not a license for anti-intellectualism, but an invitation to participate fully in academic life without fragmenting ourselves into a Sunday Christian and a weekday philosopher. And to apply all of this is that in the future papers and our presentation for these semesters, we as a triad commit to being explicit. Yes, being explicit in Christian assumption is doing real work in our reasoning instead of silently translating it into vague and secular language.
In second application, in our study group, we regularly ask what are the specifically Christian question here, so that our work is genuinely responsive to the church's concerns and not merely driven by whatever is trending in secular philosophy.
Lastly, in our personal lives of prayer and study, we will ask God to unify our minds and hearts so that our philosophical efforts are part of our discipleship, an offering to God and service to others rather than a separate academic persona that brackets out our deepest convictions.
That's all, and thank you for staying with us.